We are Pro Cannabis Media.
A big shout out to Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary in the Boston area with 3 locations, 2 in Cambridge and 1 in Somerville. Rev Clinics recently donated 100 gallons of hand sanitizer to local hospitals. They package those products in their Fitchburg Grow facility, and they'll all arrive in hospitals the 1st of next week. That's why at Rev Clinics, the patient really does come first.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to a very special edition of Weed Talk Now. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I'm Curt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net, a website online where you can learn a lot about cannabis, including mapping, social network, blog posts, videos, jobs, and a whole lot of other things.
Just about everything you need but the product itself, Curt, right?
Exactly. That's the problem.
Well, we could talk about that some other time. But joining us also on the phone from New York City is Debra Borchardt. She is the founder of the Green Market Report. She worked at Forbes for many, many years. She also was a financial journalist and vice president of Bear Stearns, where she held a Series 7 and registered investment advisor license. And Debra has a master's degree in business journalism from NYU, New York University. Debra, tell me a little bit about the Green Market Report. How did you get into this, and how successful has it been over the last few years?
Well, we started Green Market Report in 2017, so we're about to celebrate our 3rd year of being online. And, you know, it's been tough as a media company. I think it's been tough for media all around, not just cannabis media, but media in general. So it's certainly been definitely had its challenges, but it's also been pretty rewarding. And I feel like Green Market Report has established itself at a time that a lot of other cannabis media have fallen apart and imploded and gone away. We just got a statistic from Meltwater last week saying that we had a potential reach of over 2 million people. So I'm pretty excited about that. You know, we've done it all with a lot of grit and hustle and moxie, as I like to say. And I'm pretty pleased with where we're at. We've been bootstrapped. We haven't raised any money. We haven't taken any money. So it's certainly been a real hard effort, but I feel like we're really starting to hit our stride, and things are starting to really pay off.
Curt, I know you've got a bunch of questions on your sheet to chat with Debra about, so I'm going to let you take over here to start.
Sure. Coming out of the COVID and where the market is at, give me your best guess narrative on the overall stock market times what you think, and then within that, the stock market, just the cannabis niche, say 3 months, 6 months, 9. What's your opinion on how this turns around or what happens?
I couldn't even say when I think it's going to turn around. That's just so hard to say. You know, the stock market in general doesn't really relate to the economy, if you will, because people buying and selling stocks, while they are doing it on a very broad basis of, I think this is what's going to happen with trade, I think this is what's going to happen with retail, and so then they buy and sell. But there's also really just a lot of buying and selling based on, I'm just trying to make a profit in this spread on this price, versus this is where I really think the market's going to go. And with that in mind, I think that's why we've seen a lot of these fits and starts after the big sell-off, because that big sell-off, you know, needed to happen. We've got a lot of devastation in our economy, and I don't doubt that we'll go into a depression. We're certainly going to hit a recession, but more than likely a depression. I mean, this is going to take a really long time to get out of. So having said all that, you know, when we look at the cannabis industry within that broader picture, you know, the cannabis industry had so much promise, and it's really not panned out in the way I think that a lot of companies thought it would. We've seen a whole lot of layoffs. We're continuing to see layoffs. We just saw green growth brands go into receivership. We're seeing companies that were lent money the lenders are now saying, yeah, I'm not extending your dates out. I'm not giving you any freebies. You need to pay me, and you need to pay me now. So I feel like we're still going to see a lot of pain within the cannabis industry because it's just not, the states aren't rolling out with a lot of enthusiasm like I think people expected. And so these companies were also, there's a saying, price for perfection. They weren't really priced for perfection, but they were strategized for perfection. Their business strategies were based on just everything going perfectly and everything going really well. And when that has not happened, they fall apart. And we're seeing that across the board, not really just, we're seeing even big people like Acreage backing off of acquisitions. They laid off 122 people last week. So I think it's going to be a while before we really start to see that. I think we've got to get out of this pandemic mode so that the dispensaries can reopen in a normal manner and not with the curbside delivery and those types of things. But I think it's going to, once again, push us further out into, what we're going to say are the salad days of the cannabis industry.
Which I know we're definitely, I'm going to jump in here, Curt, because I think the next question is, I'm going to take it right out of your mouth. In fact, one of the things Curt and I had discussed earlier on one of our shows is that cannabis may be in a very favorable position if and when we have to go through this recession and or depression to actually build and serve as a employment opportunity, an investment opportunity, and a way to serve as a catalyst for a new economy emerging. Do you see that actually happening, or are they still going to be having to deal with all the stigma issues and want to continue to treat it more like a necessary evil weed than the actual plant medicine that it is?
I don't think it's stigma issues. I think it's just purely business decisions. I think that a lot of these companies got out over their skis, spent like drunken sailors, outfitted these grow facilities as if they were Taj Mahals with, the latest and greatest in software and tables and lighting and you name it, at a time when the prices were coming down on the wholesale product. We thought CBD was going to be the end all be all for this cannabis market. And the demand for CBD oil actually started to go down, even though there were thousands of new products out there. I don't think, to me, it's not really a stigma issue. I don't feel that that's the thing. I really feel it's just a business decision. I think too many of these CEOs got into these jobs and just gave these business plans that were rainbows and unicorns. And so those companies are really struggling. I think that we do have a handful of companies that made really conservative decisions, and they're the ones that look much, much stronger right now.
Debra, do you think COVID-19 helped or hurt cannabis federal legalization in the sense that, yes, it did push it off and anything that's not life-threatening right now gets moved away? But in the same sense, if that depression-like level is coming, like maybe some of us feel, will it be part of a recovery? It creates jobs. The demand is held up. Will Trump or the next president say, everything's going against the wall?
You could be right on that. We actually published a piece about a report that came out from MPG Group last week talking about cannabis municipal bonds, which is basically it's the idea of a revenue bond based on cannabis tax revenues. You see revenue bonds from gaming and tobacco. It's very common with other products. Yes, I could see some states and municipalities looking at that as a real a real option for addressing what we're going to have to deal with COVID. So there's definitely the potential there that legislation could be pushed through as a way to get additional revenue to pay off some of this stuff, because this is going to be a big bill to have to pay when we start to have to realize some of these rescue packages are excruciatingly expensive. I know here in New York, Governor Cuomo has already said the state could be bankrupt off of this. And that's a really sobering thought. And if we could get bankrupt off of this, and we have tax revenue that's, very, very high, consider the states like a Louisiana that might not have the tax revenue within the state to pay for all that. So yeah, I could definitely see that as a potential.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was thinking just job growth where we need jobs, period. And you're talking, well, think of the tax revenue that's going to help to pay those bills as well that all the states are going to want, as well as the jobs. So, yep, I agree with you.
And Debra, in one of your stories today on Green Market Report, you talked about some of the businesses in cannabis that might be failing and having go into receivership, and that allows their equipment to be resold. That is not something that a lot of people thought would ever happen this early in the beginnings of the cannabis industry, and yet there's still plenty of examples now of companies that are failing and looking to dump their equipment.
We actually saw that happen really at the beginning of legalization in California, and in fact there was a whole secondary market from the illegal grow operations getting raided. And what was this is a super interesting story, because what was happening was the police would come in, they would be raiding them, and it was really more because they weren't paying taxes. And so they'd get them on building code violations. So the owners obviously would run. They would run for the hills. And then they would leave behind all their tables and lights and equipment. And so there were people that would come in and pick, and the municipalities were like, I don't know what to do with these grow lights and tables and all this junk. They would start to sell it. And there were a couple of people that were buying this stuff and then reselling it. So there was a whole secondary market already happening. I think this is just going to, really strengthen that secondary market. If you're really into cultivation, everything there is about the different lights and the different tables and the different HVACs and all this stuff. So you could get some pretty good bargains on some used equipment. I think that's definitely going to happen, especially when you see people like Canopy Growth completely closing some of their indoor grow facilities and just switching to, hybrids and outdoor grows.
Although it would be a great federal sting operation to get all the grow lights and all the grow material, put it out, and just kind of have a yard sale. But be like, yeah, sure, anybody that shows up, well, let's see some license or ID. So, be a little careful walking into those used grow light sales if you're a grower.
Yeah, like I said, if you're a cultivator, you know what's what, and so you would know what you would want to buy. And most of the people that are doing that do know what they want to buy. They do know what is good and what is cheap.
True, yeah.
So another one of your interesting items on your Green Market Report, Debra, was this article that Dwight Blake put out there. What is more important during the COVID-19 pandemic? Having your regular stash of cannabis or food, or cannabis and face masks, or cannabis and hand sanitizers? And I'll tell you, the cannabis market seems to be holding their own, so to speak, and a lot of these, including the fact that the people at that time of this article, which was March 24th, I want to put that date out there, because at that time, people were more concerned about having their stash than they were about face masks. But we all know now that we're supposed to be wearing our face masks out into the public. And a lot has changed over the last 2 weeks since Dwight Blake put this out there.
Right. It was just a fun piece to put up there. I think that you're right. You're always going to have a consumer that's going to pick cannabis over just about anything else. So.
It's a loyal crowd.
That's right.
The age-old question: would you rather have money and no weed, or weed and no money?
That's a new article. I gotta go.
Debra, you know what's been going on in Massachusetts, I'm sure, because you keep your hand on all this stuff. And you know that the governor had shut down adult use recreational dispensaries, even though he kept the medical dispensaries alive, kind of serving as a, I don't want to call it a punishment, but he again made a distinction between the two entities and then used the excuse of, well, we don't want out-of-staters coming in and hoarding all the cannabis stores, or we don't want large groups of people waiting in line. And there's been a lot of controversy and a lot of pushback on the governor because of this distinction that he made. This is the kind of thing that gets me all riled up when I see liquor stores being having the opportunity to continue to have their business. And we all know that the three growth items in a recession and this pandemic have been liquor stores, cannabis stores, and guns, which is also a little disconcerting for me. But what's your initial reaction when you hear about the news that the governor, Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, has made an exception for adult use recreational facilities, saying they are non-essential?
Well, when they first allowed the rec stores to stay open, they had told them you could stay open if you use social distancing measures, and several of them just didn't. They just didn't. There were photographs of people crammed in lines. They were crammed in the stores. They were really focused on just selling as much as they could sell. And so I felt like, now not all of them did that. Some of them did have, taped lines on the stores and on the sidewalks, but it wasn't across the board. And so I think that that's what happened, is they got punished because some people just refused to social distance. I also heard that the liquor store lobbies had lobbied the governor to shut down the rec stores because it was hurting their business. I don't have any proof of that. I can't confirm that, but that's another bit of that information that I was told. That kind of makes a lot of sense. I did see the pictures of people standing in the lines very close together, so I know that definitely did happen too. As far as the New Yorkers going across the state line, they definitely were doing that. They've been doing that, and that's why there's stores right across the state line, is right, specifically for those customers. So that is a real thing. And with the number of cases in New York, there's a lot of fear of New Yorkers coming to other states. So I think that, I hate to say it, but I kind of think that that's a valid thing to say. And you can't really leave a rec store open and say, okay, only Massachusetts customers, no New York customers. That just makes it hard. I kind of wish he would have just left the rec stores open and really asked the owners, operators to been better about, or just shut them to no entry and have curbside delivery. I know my wine store is doing that, where you just pull up and they bring the wine out to your car. I certainly think they could have figured something out like that. A lot of the other states have figured that out.
Yeah, but we don't look at that. We want to be doing something differently in Massachusetts. It's just how we've always been. We kind of go against the curve here, even way back into the 18th century when we had that little tea party. And Lord knows, I have a feeling there wasn't just tea around in the 18th century either. Debra, if you could look into your crystal ball over the next 6 to 12 months even, worst case scenario, best case snenario.
Well, best case scenario is we're able to, reconvene and gather again after, April or May. And then things start to get back to normal in the summer, and then we just stay that way. The worst case scenario is we have this window of normalcy in the summer, but then it cycles back on us again in the fall, which is what a lot of the scientists are saying, is that we're going to have another wave of this come back around in the fall. And I think if that happens, it's going to be really rough on not only our industry, because a lot of conferences and events have been rescheduled to September and October. And that's how a lot of people in the cannabis industry make a living, is off of events. So that's the worst case scenario.
Getting kind of depressed at this point, Deborah.
I know. I felt like
Double recession, depression.
I feel like everything I've said has been completely depressing. But I hate, look, some of the companies started out saying that they had really good numbers at the beginning of this thing because the sales had spiked. And I felt like for a lot of cannabis businesses, this was going to be the saving grace, this essential service thing. And it will be for several of them. But I think that it's still going to be, a have and a have nots. So the people that were able to get through this will certainly do well.
Well, we all hope that this new normal will change very quickly and move forward as quickly as we possibly can, yet as safely as we can. And none of us really do know what the future is going to hold. But I will say this, Deborah, the cannabis industry is in good hands with your reporting, with the Green Market Report. I'm also going to tell Curt, I think he's doing a great job up on cannabis.net as well. He continues to churn out more content on a daily basis than most normal human beings. And I don't know if that goes.
It's a loyal crowd. I'll just leave you with that. It's a loyal crowd.
All right. Well, Debra Borchardt from the Green Market Report, I really do appreciate you carving out a few minutes of your time. I know it's a difficult time for everybody, especially in New York City. Just to let you know, we are thinking of you down there. Keep up the good work, and we look forward to seeing more out of New York City, more good news on the Green Market Report and in the future.
Thank you.
All right. That was Debra Borchardt and Curt Dalton from cannabis.net. This has been another edition of Weed Talk Now. So for Curt and for Debra, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for joining us on Weed Talk Now. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, stay safe, and stay sane.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.